Our next principle is the principle of reflection. And in many ways, reflection stands at the heart of dialogue in particular, but many of the partnership principles. The conversations we have are thinking partnerships, they're a meeting of the minds, they're opportunities for us to think with someone. And when we live according to the principle of reflection, we want our interactions with others to facilitate reflection, to generate reflection. And a lot of people have influenced my thinking. Probably the first one is Donald Schoen, who talks about reflection in action, which is reflection during the moment, where you're looking at what you do. But he also talks about reflection where you look back on what happened and you say, how did that go? What are my thoughts about it? In the moment, you're trying to make decisions about what's going well, what needs to be changed, what's right, what's not right. Looking back, we make the same kind of thinking. And Joellen Killian expanded that by talking about reflection for action, which is about saying, how do I take what I'm learning here and how do I use it in the future? This idea, this conversation, this strategy. In my book, Unmistakable Impact, talk about looking back, looking at, and looking ahead, which is kind of a simpler way of saying what Schoen and Joellen have said. Maybe it loses a little subtlety, but I think it gets the idea. Sometimes we look back and say, how did it go? Sometimes we say, how's this going right now? What adjustments do I need to make? And sometimes we say, how do I use this thing I'm learning? How do I use it for the future? It sounds a bit funny to say, I'm reflecting for the future. But it is a kind of thinking where we say, how do I take these ideas? How do I implement them? To me, reflection is really, really an important thing because we want to do thinking. We want to be involved in the thinking. In this book, Thomas Davenport, it's called Thinking for a Living. In this book, he talks about knowledge workers, people who use their imagination, their creativity, their intelligence, their education to do their work, people who think for a living. And what Davenport did is he surveyed people and interviewed people and came up with a list of the qualities of what knowledge workers want. What are the things that most drive a knowledge worker? To me, for the record, a teacher is the quintessential knowledge worker. One book proposes teachers make between 800 and 1,500 decisions a day. They're always thinking. Now, their decisions might be snapshot, really quick decisions, but they're definitely knowledge workers, people who apply their knowledge to do their work. Anyway, in this book, Davenport said the defining characteristic of a knowledge worker is the need for autonomy. He said someone who thinks for a living wants to do the thinking, and when we do the thinking for other people, they're going to resist. A simple way of seeing that is, if you're in education, have you ever been on a committee that developed curriculum? The curriculum committee gets together over the summer, they eat bad food, they create this curriculum, and then if you're on the committee and you're going to teach that next year, you can't wait to teach algebra. No kid in America has ever had as good an algebra class as you're going to teach based on the work you did that summer. You're excited about trying out the new ideas. But if you aren't on the committee, it's just more stuff you have to do. You don't have much excitement about it. In fact, just the opposite. It's like, I've already got so much and now I've got this other thing. And so reflection's critical because it's what we do. It's what knowledge workers do. But if we don't give people the chance to do the thinking, they're probably not going to embrace what we do. So when we work from the principle of partnership, we work from the belief that the people we work with need to do the thinking. We don't think for them and roll it out. We think at least with them or facilitate the possibility for them to reflect by looking back, looking at, and looking ahead.